The room was alive with music and laughter, a swirl of lantern light reflecting off polished wooden floors, yet she felt utterly invisible. Among the couples twirling and spinning, she lingered near the edge of the dance hall, her hands clutching the edges of her dress as if the fabric could shield her from the stares she feared. Every giggle, every shared glance across the floor reminded her that she was alone, not by choice, but by habit. She had come hoping for a brief escape from the solitude of her quiet life, but now, in the midst of the celebration, her isolation felt sharper than ever. She had never been the center of attention. Friends often paired off without her, and the boldness required to step into the spotlight seemed to her an insurmountable barrier. Her thoughts kept her company instead, the memory of past dances where she had been overlooked, the sting of unspoken invitations that never came, and the whispered teasing from those who considered her too shy, too small, or too plain. But tonight, as the fiddles played and the drums pulsed, there was a fragile hope fluttering within her chest. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe someone would see her, not as an afterthought, but as someone worth noticing. She watched the couples move in perfect rhythm, their laughter and whispered words creating a bubble of warmth she could feel but never enter. Her eyes traced the familiar faces of the townspeople, some casting fleeting glances her way, but none stopping, none asking. Her heart beat a little faster with each fleeting possibility, each imagined invitation that never came. She tried to focus on the music instead, letting the lively tune fill the empty corners of her mind. But the loneliness was persistent, clinging to her like a shadow. Even so, she was not completely unaware of herself. She straightened her posture, smoothed the folds of her dress, and tried to hold her chin high. She wasn't unkind or uninteresting. She had stories to tell, dreams to share, and laughter tucked beneath her quiet exterior. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter. She felt suspended in a space between longing and fear, a delicate balance that left her heart fluttering yet hesitant. Every step forward seemed risky. Every glance might betray the hope she could barely admit to herself. From across the hall, she caught glimpses of the other dancers. Their movements were fluid, confident, and carefree, a stark contrast to her frozen stillness. A few times, someone's hand brushed hers as they passed, and she recoiled slightly, unnerved by the intimacy of connection she had rarely experienced. Yet she couldn't help but watch, learning the rhythm, imagining what it might feel like to be part of the dance, to move in tandem with someone who saw her. The thought alone made her chest tighten with longing. Her mind wandered to why she had come alone. Perhaps it was fate, or perhaps it was a quiet rebellion against waiting for someone else to notice her. She had dressed carefully, chosen the softest fabrics, and brushed her hair until it caught the light, hoping, without daring to admit it, that tonight would bring a chance encounter, a small miracle. And as she stood there, almost invisible in the corner of the dance hall, she felt the first flicker of anticipation, a whisper in her heart that someone might finally cross the room, break the spell of solitude, and see her for who she truly was. The doors of the dance hall swung open with a subtle creak, and a hush seemed to ripple through the crowd, though the music played on. He stepped in, tall and broad-shouldered, his presence commanding without arrogance. Dust clung faintly to the hems of his boots from a long ride, and the leather of his coat had softened with wear. There was an effortless confidence in the way he moved, a calm assurance that he belonged to the world he walked through, yet it was tempered by a gentleness that few noticed at first glance. Heads turned, conversations faltered mid-sentence, and eyes lingered for a moment, but he hardly seemed aware of the attention. His focus was singular, directed toward the one person who had captured his notice even before he had fully entered the room. Across the crowded hall, she felt the shift in energy before she even saw him. Something subtle yet magnetic pulled her gaze toward the entrance. And then he appeared, stepping into the glow of lantern light, scanning the floor with a quiet intensity. Their eyes met, and she felt her pulse skip. There was a warmth in his gaze that unsettled her, a weight of attention that was at once thrilling and intimidating. For the first time that evening, she felt truly seen, not as a shadow on the sidelines, not as a forgotten soul among the dancers, but as someone worthy of being noticed. Her breath caught in her throat, and she pressed her fingers together, unsure whether to move or stay frozen in awe. He didn't rush toward her, nor did he make a show of his approach. Instead, he moved with purpose, threading through the dancers with a steady, measured gait. He nodded to familiar faces, exchanged brief pleasantries, but his eyes never left hers. Each step seemed to carry the promise of safety, of respect, and of an unspoken understanding that she mattered. The room seemed to fade around her as he drew closer, the chatter and laughter blending into a distant hum. In that moment, it was as if the dance hall existed only for the two of them, a private stage set for a meeting that felt fated. She tried to steady herself, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face and shifting nervously on her feet. He noticed, of course, how could he not? His gaze softened slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of her unease. He didn't judge or ridicule. Instead, he offered a quiet reassurance, an invisible hand guiding her toward the possibility of courage. And yet, the tiniest flicker of mischief danced in his eyes, a hint that he might enjoy the challenge of drawing her out of her shell. It was magnetic, impossible to ignore, and it stirred something deep within her, a mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and a hesitant thrill as he came closer. The music seemed to follow him, almost in rhythm with his movements. The other dancers appeared peripheral, like extras in a play where the main act was unfolding between him and the solitary girl. Her heart raced with a cocktail of excitement and apprehension. He had crossed the room with purpose. Yes, but he had done so with respect, with attention, and with a quiet confidence that left no doubt. He had seen her, truly seen her, and intended to close the distance between them. And in that moment, standing alone on the edge of the dance floor, she felt the first real spark of hope that tonight, perhaps, her loneliness might finally be broken. He finally reached her, closing the distance that had seemed both impossibly far and yet fated. Her heart hammered in her chest, a wild, uneven rhythm that mirrored the music around them. She was acutely aware of every detail, the rough edge of his coat, the faint scent of saddle leather and earth, the way his boots whispered against the polished floor. And yet it wasn't his appearance that struck her most, but the certainty in his gaze, the steady, unflinching acknowledgement that she existed, that she mattered, and that in this crowded room, she was the one he had sought. He offered a simple nod and a polite smile, small but commanding. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his voice low but warm, resonating with a calm confidence that seemed to reach directly to her soul. She blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of the question and the ease with which it made her pulse quicken. For a moment words failed her, and all she could do was nod, a faint smile tugging at her lips. The gesture was hesitant, almost timid, yet there was an unspoken trust in it, a fragile acknowledgement of the possibility that this stranger, this cowboy, might see more in her than she had allowed herself to hope. He extended his hand and she placed hers in his, feeling the strength of his grip, not overpowering, but grounding, like an anchor in the swirling uncertainty of her emotions. As they stepped into the rhythm of the music, there was an awkwardness at first, a hesitancy born of nerves and unfamiliarity. Her feet stumbled slightly over the polished floor, and he laughed softly, a low, warm sound that made her cheeks flush. "Don't worry," he said, eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. "I've got you." That reassurance, so simple yet profound, eased the tension coiling in her chest, and she began to relax, allowing the music and his presence to guide her. They moved slowly at first, testing each other's rhythm, learning the subtle cues and shifts of balance. She noticed the way he adjusted his steps to accommodate hers, never letting her feel offbeat or out of place. With each turn and pivot, the nervousness ebbed away, replaced by a growing sense of connection, a magnetic pull that seemed to align their hearts with the cadence of the dance. Around them, the hall continued to bustle, but in that moment, it was as if time had contracted, shrinking the world until it encompassed only the two of them. Moving in tentative harmony, they exchanged a few words, brief and almost casual, yet each syllable carried weight. She found herself laughing at his gentle teasing, the sound startling even to her own ears. He listened intently to her responses, nodding thoughtfully, occasionally brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Every small gesture communicated more than words could, attentiveness, respect, and a burgeoning curiosity that mirrored her own. It was a dance of personalities as much as of feet, an intricate weaving of two souls discovering each other for the first time. By the end of the song, something subtle had shifted. The initial tension and apprehension melted into a shared understanding, a spark that neither could deny. She felt seen, appreciated, and for the first time that evening, unafraid to imagine the possibility of being noticed. Not as a lonely outsider, but as someone truly wanted. He gave her a final, lingering smile before stepping back slightly. A silent acknowledgement that the night was only beginning, and that this dance, this encounter, was the first step in something far larger than either of them could yet imagine. The music swelled and faded, leaving a momentary hush that made the world feel smaller, as if the entire dance hall existed solely for the two of them. She was still catching her breath from the intensity of the last song, cheeks flushed with warmth, eyes bright with exhilaration. Then it happened, a subtle shift in the room that made her glance around, and she realized someone was trying to step into the space between them. A rival admirer, a man known for his swagger and overconfidence, had approached, smiling too broadly, his intentions clear. He reached out, a hand brushing hers with practiced familiarity, and spoke words meant to charm and intimidate at once. She stiffened, a flash of unease cutting through the warmth she had felt moments before. Her heart pounded, not from the dance this time, but from a sudden fear that her fragile moment of connection could be interrupted, that the brief magic of being seen could be stolen away. The laughter of other dancers, once background music, now seemed intrusive, the whispers of the crowd like a wave pressing in around her. But he was there. The cowboy, her unexpected champion, tensed ever so slightly, his hand tightening around hers, not roughly, but with a controlled, protective strength. His eyes locked onto the intruder, steady and unwavering, and the energy in his gaze carried a warning that needed no words. And then, with a voice that was both calm and commanding, he declared, "She's mine." The words were simple, yet they cut through the murmurs and chatter like a bell, resonant and clear, leaving no room for doubt. The room froze for a heartbeat. Gasps whispered through the crowd, some startled, some delighted, others secretly envious. All eyes turned toward them, witnessing a moment of bold, undeniable possession that was as romantic as it was daring. She felt her stomach flutter in a mix of shock and relief, her pulse surging with the thrill of being claimed, not in a possessive or harsh way, but in a manner that felt protective, sincere, and undeniably intimate. The phrase echoed in her mind, each repetition igniting warmth and excitement. "He sees me. He wants me. I matter." The rival man faltered, unsure how to respond to such a confident assertion. The cowboy's stance didn't change. He didn't raise his voice further. Didn't need to. The single declaration was enough. Authority radiated from him, not the authority of arrogance, but of certainty. He had recognized something in her that she had long struggled to see in herself, and he had acted without hesitation. In that simple, declarative moment, the dance hall became a stage for something larger, a recognition of her worth, a signal that she was no longer alone, and a spark of the romance that would come to define the rest of the evening. She looked up at him, awe and gratitude swirling in her eyes. The intensity of his gaze softened as he offered a small, reassuring smile. No one else mattered. Not the gossiping crowd, not the intruding admirer, not the music or the lights. All that existed in that moment was him and her, and the unspoken promise contained in his words. She felt a thrill of hope, a tender warmth that blossomed in her chest. The dance resumed, the music filling the space again, but it was different now. The magic of their connection had shifted into something permanent, something bold. She moved with him, her confidence quietly growing with every step, buoyed by the knowledge that she had been seen, chosen, and claimed. The moment of declaration had transformed the night, and perhaps her life, setting in motion a story of romance, courage, and the undeniable pull of two hearts destined to find each other. The music swelled and faded, leaving a momentary hush that made the world feel smaller, as if the entire dance hall existed solely for the two of them. She was still catching her breath from the intensity of the last song, cheeks flushed with warmth, eyes bright with exhilaration. Then it happened, a subtle shift in the room that made her glance around, and she realized someone was trying to step into the space between them. A rival admirer, a man known for his swagger and overconfidence, had approached, smiling too broadly, his intentions clear. He reached out, a hand brushing hers with practiced familiarity, and spoke words meant to charm and intimidate at once. She stiffened, a flash of unease cutting through the warmth she had felt moments before. Her heart pounded, not from the dance this time, but from a sudden fear that her fragile moment of connection could be interrupted. that the brief magic of being seen could be stolen away. The laughter of other dancers, once background music, now seemed intrusive, the whispers of the crowd like a wave pressing in around her. But he was there. The cowboy, her unexpected champion, tensed ever so slightly, his hand tightening around hers, not roughly, but with a controlled, protective strength. His eyes locked onto the intruder, steady and unwavering, and the energy in his gaze carried a warning that needed no words. And then, with a voice that was both calm and commanding, he declared, "She's mine." The words were simple, yet they cut through the murmurs and chatter like a bell, resonant and clear, leaving no room for doubt. The room froze for a heartbeat. Gasps whispered through the crowd, some startled, some delighted, others secretly envious. All eyes turned toward them, witnessing a moment of bold, undeniable possession that was as romantic as it was daring. She felt her stomach flutter in a mix of shock and relief, her pulse surging with the thrill of being claimed, not in a possessive or harsh way, but in a manner that felt protective, sincere, and undeniably intimate. The phrase echoed in her mind, each repetition igniting warmth and excitement. "He sees me. He wants me. I matter." The rival man faltered, unsure how to respond to such a confident assertion. The cowboy's stance didn't change. He didn't raise his voice further, didn't need to. The single declaration was enough. Authority radiated from him, not the authority of arrogance, but of certainty. He had recognized something in her that she had long struggled to see in herself, and he had acted without hesitation. In that simple, declarative moment, the dance hall became a stage for something larger, a recognition of her worth, a signal that she was no longer alone, and a spark of the romance that would come to define the rest of the evening. She looked up at him, awe and gratitude swirling in her eyes. The intensity of his gaze softened as he offered a small, reassuring smile. No one else mattered, not the gossiping crowd, not the intruding admirer, not the music or the lights. All that existed in that moment was him and her, and the unspoken promise contained in his words. She felt a thrill of hope, a tender warmth that blossomed in her chest. The dance resumed, the music filling the space again, but it was different now. The magic of their connection had shifted into something permanent, something bold. She moved with him, her confidence quietly growing with every step, buoyed by the knowledge that she had been seen, chosen, and claimed. The moment of declaration had transformed the night and perhaps her life, setting in motion a story of romance, courage, and the undeniable pull of two hearts destined to find each other. The crowd around them slowly began to stir, the whispers growing into quiet chatter, then laughter and speculation. Eyes that had been indifferent or curious now lingered on the pair, scanning their expressions, the tension in their bodies, and the unmistakable connection that had just been solidified. Some nodded in approval, imagining the fairy tale allure of the cowboy claiming the shy girl. Others whispered in shock, incredulous at the boldness of his declaration. Yet amid the murmurs of the dance hall, she felt a calm bubble of safety and attention surrounding her, as though the world had momentarily shrunk to just the two of them. She tried to process what had just happened. Her heart still raced, her cheeks burned with embarrassment and exhilaration in equal measure. He had claimed her, publicly, undeniably, but there was no forceful arrogance in his words, only a protective certainty that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. She could hardly believe it. The thought that someone could care, someone could notice her so completely, was overwhelming. She laughed softly, almost in disbelief, and he smiled at her, that same warm, reassuring smile that had first drawn her in, as if to say, "Don't worry. I've got you." The other dancers gradually returned to their own steps and conversations, though many still stole glances at them, intrigued by the intensity radiating from the pair. She felt herself relax slightly, encouraged by his steady presence. The earlier anxiety that had plagued her, the nervousness about standing alone, seemed to melt into the background. She could feel the pulse of the music again, the movement of the dance floor. But it was different now. It felt like a stage for them rather than a sea of strangers. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear, and said something small, almost casual, that carried an intimate warmth. "Are you okay?" The simplicity of the question, paired with genuine concern, made her chest swell with emotion. She nodded, unable to find words at first, and then whispered, "Yes, I think so." It was an acknowledgement not only of the moment but of the subtle bond forming between them. In his gaze, she saw both admiration and curiosity. The beginnings of trust and understanding that went far beyond the fleeting thrill of a dance. For a few quiet minutes, they moved together without speaking, letting the rhythm of the music and the sway of their bodies communicate what words could not. Her initial shyness began to transform into a tentative confidence. She lifted her chin slightly, allowed her shoulders to relax, and let herself feel the joy of being noticed, of being desired in a way that was both protective and tender. Around them, the room continued its lively pace, but for her, the focus had narrowed, sharpened, to the steady presence of the cowboy by her side. There was also a small thrill of daring in her chest. Part of her marveled at the audacity of the declaration, the way he had cut through the social currents with a single, powerful sentence. She felt both grateful and bold, sensing that this moment was the beginning of something larger, something that could reshape her understanding of herself and her place in the world. As the next song began, she realized that she no longer feared being alone. Even if no one else noticed, even if whispers continued, she had been claimed, acknowledged, and valued. And with him beside her, she could begin to step into a new version of herself, one capable of confidence, connection, and the quiet joy of realizing that she was finally seen. The aftermath of the declaration wasn't just about the reactions of the crowd. It was about the transformation inside her, a soft but undeniable shift that would shape everything that came next. The initial thrill of the dance had settled into a gentle warmth, a quiet glow that lingered in her chest. But as the evening continued, the reality of the world outside their shared bubble began to intrude. Whispers in the corners of the dance hall, curious glances from acquaintances, and subtle jabs from those who disapproved, reminded her that life was rarely as simple as a stolen moment on a crowded floor. The excitement of being seen and claimed collided with insecurities she had long buried, stirring doubt and hesitation. She found herself questioning, does he really mean it? Am I truly worth this attention? Meanwhile, the cowboy, though steady and composed, faced his own obstacles. A figure from his past, perhaps a former flame or a rival admirer, watched the growing closeness between them with obvious displeasure. Their presence was a subtle threat, a reminder that external forces could challenge the fragile connection they were beginning to form. Though he tried to remain focused on her, he could not ignore the tension building around them. It tested his patience, his judgment, and most importantly, his ability to protect the delicate bond that had started to blossom. Even among well-meaning friends and family, opinions and unsolicited advice added pressure. Some wondered aloud whether this new connection was fleeting, while others encouraged it, unintentionally amplifying her anxiety. Every word, every glance, seemed magnified, making her second-guess her feelings and actions. She wanted to trust him completely, to surrender to the joy of the moment. But the weight of past disappointments and the uncertainty of human intentions kept her cautious. Despite these external pressures, moments alone with him revealed the strength of their connection. Small gestures, his hand brushing hers, a shared laugh, the way he remembered tiny details about her preferences, served as quiet anchors, reminding her that not all challenges were insurmountable. Each smile, each gentle touch, reinforced the notion that the bond between them was genuine, even in the face of outside scrutiny. But the challenges continued, testing her confidence and their ability to communicate openly. Internal struggles also surfaced. She wrestled with self-doubt, wondering if she was bold enough, confident enough, or interesting enough to hold his attention beyond the thrill of a single dance. Every time she saw him talking to someone else or noticed the attention he drew from others, a pang of jealousy and insecurity tugged at her heart. These emotions were natural but destabilizing, forcing her to confront fears she had long tried to ignore. The cowboy, in turn, needed to balance his protective instincts with patience. He had to navigate the delicate line between asserting his intentions and giving her space to feel secure in the relationship. Misunderstandings arose, small miscommunications or hesitations that momentarily threatened the harmony they had begun to build. But through each challenge, they were learning the importance of trust, communication, and the courage to be vulnerable with one another. By the end of the night, they had faced their first real tests as a pair. Though tension and doubt lingered, there was a mutual recognition that these obstacles were not insurmountable. Each challenge revealed something essential, that connection required not just desire and attraction, but patience, understanding, and a willingness to navigate both internal and external pressures. They left the dance with a sense of cautious hope, their bond tempered by the realization that love, real, enduring love, was something to be earned and protected, not simply declared in the heat of a moment. The night had worn on, and the lively hum of the dance hall began to fade into the quiet of the town streets. The energy, once vibrant and overwhelming, now settled into a gentle, comfortable calm. She walked beside him, their hands brushing occasionally, each touch deliberate but unspoken, a continuation of the connection they had built throughout the evening. The challenges and doubts of the past hours lingered in her mind, but they felt lighter now, softened by the certainty of the bond they had forged. In the cool night air, he stopped and turned toward her, his eyes holding the same warmth and intensity that had first caught her attention. "Tonight was different," he said softly, almost as if the words were meant more for himself than for her. She nodded, understanding the sentiment without needing it to be explained. The dance, the declaration, the obstacles, they had all led to this moment, a quiet, unspoken recognition of something deeper than fleeting attraction. He took her hands in his, steadying them, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly meet his gaze without fear or hesitation. In that look, she saw more than admiration or desire. She saw commitment, respect, and a promise of protection and partnership. The challenges of the evening, the whispers, the doubts, the rival admirers, they seemed to dissolve in the face of this unwavering certainty. She realized that the bond they had begun to form was not dependent on the applause of others or the absence of obstacles. It was rooted in mutual recognition, trust, and the willingness to embrace vulnerability together. They began to talk, their conversation flowing effortlessly now, a natural extension of the dance that had brought them together. They shared small confessions, dreams, and laughter, weaving together the threads of their personalities with ease. Each revelation, each smile, each gentle touch reinforced the sense that this was more than a passing connection. It was the beginning of something enduring. The uncertainties that had shadowed them were still present, but they were no longer daunting. They were challenges to face together, not alone. At one point, he leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and said, "I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm not letting you go." There was no bravado in his words, no demand, only a quiet, steadfast assurance. She felt a warmth spread through her, a mix of relief, joy, and the tender thrill of being genuinely wanted. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that she was seen for who she truly was, and that someone was willing to stand beside her, publicly and privately, through whatever came next. They walked back to the dance hall one last time, not because they needed to, but because the night had become a shared memory they wanted to seal. The hall was nearly empty, the music replaced by echoes of the evening's laughter. They stepped onto the floor together once more, this time without the nervousness or hesitation that had marked their first steps. The dance was quiet, intimate, and filled with meaning, a culmination of everything they had experienced. As the night drew to a close, she rested her head lightly against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the reassurance of his presence. The journey from being invisible, overlooked, and uncertain to feeling chosen, seen, and cherished had transformed her. The cowboys' bold declaration, the trials they had faced, and the quiet moments of understanding had all led to a resolution that felt both inevitable and magical. The story ended not with grand gestures or dramatic finales, but with the profound simplicity of two hearts aligned. Hand in hand, they stepped into the cool night, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them, strengthened by the knowledge that together they could navigate anything. The music had stopped, the crowd had dispersed, but the bond forged that evening would carry them forward, into love, trust, and a future built on the unwavering certainty of being truly seen and chosen.